So this is the betting market right now for the 2028 primary. They already have one, and we see it right here that JD did drop a little bit from yesterday, which is kind of strange. He was like at 51, and now he's
That's
like
because of my video. No, I'm kidding.
But we see here, yeah, I don't know why his sense dropped, but he's the overwhelming favorite to win the primary. And if like Donald Trump Jr. doesn't run, you could basically add all of that to Vance. If Vivek doesn't run, you could basically add that to Vance as well. Like Ron DeSantis, I mean, he could run, but it's like, oh wow, the fact they even have Donald Trump here, it's like it's crazy that they even have Donald Trump as an option.
What I think is interesting is Marco Rubio being on there because he's Secretary of State or nominated Secretary of State, right?
Yeah, they did nominate him very recently. They just did. Guys, before we continue, hit the like button. It would help out. It would be very, very appreciated if you guys could hit the like button. It would help out with the show quite a bit. So definitely go ahead and hit the like button, guys. It would be very, very appreciated. So what were you saying?
Yeah, I was saying Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, is a pretty good position for somebody who's got presidential ambitions.
That is a good position. It's not as like notarized as it was before, because before, like now, if you're a governor or a VP, that's like your path to the presidency. But before, in like the 1800s, if you were Secretary of State, that was like, yeah, you're going to be president, basically. Like if that was a very prestigious position in the 1800s. It was a very, very big streak.
What I could see is the Republicans, or maybe some of the old establishment, trying to prop him up come 2028. But I just don't think he's got the steam for it. I don't think the American public's behind that. They probably think he's too moderate. I think JD is probably the way to go insofar as who's going to have the most support out of the Republican base.
Yeah, and if you look here, like guys, look at this. Look at the Democrat betting market. It is super divided. And this is going to be, if it goes to a contested convention, this is going to be horrible for them. Because honestly, if I were JD, I would try to, if he wants to run, because again, it's not even a guarantee JD runs. If JD wants to take advantage and run and carry on with the movement, JD needs to start courting people now. Like he needs to start telling potential candidates, just let me run. Just let me run and you'll get a job or whatever the case is. Like, just let me run and just, it could be unopposed. Maybe Nikki Haley tries to run. They'll probably prop her up again. Maybe they prop up some establishment candidate. It's going to happen. But the best thing for JD, he actually has a shot at winning like 90% of the primary vote, which is crazy. But he has a chance. Gavin, any of the Democrats won't be able to do that. And this kind of dispels the myth that the Republican base is more divided than the Democrat base. It's actually the opposite. The Democrats are way more divided than Republicans because, guys, the Democrats are not just like super far left people that like drink soy latte. It's not that. There are a lot of normie-esque type of people that are actually socially conservative in some ways, but like fiscally liberal, and they're very into like this abortion stuff. And it typically tends to be a lot of men that are like just want to have like, or don't want to have any consequences for their actions. Like it's a very kind of weird sub-demographic, but you have a lot of those people that are in the Democrat Party as well. And somebody like Newsom, I think just like personally, I think he would appeal to that kind of subgroup. So I think in 2028, you are going to see any of the Democrats probably improve with college whites and probably even college educated voters as a whole. But I think that Vance, this is the X factor. I think any of the other Republicans would underperform Trump with college or non-college whites. But I think that somebody like JD could actually improve on Trump's non-college white margin. That's going to be the X factor that saves the election for him. That's going to be the big factor. But we do see here that they're super divided. Look, John Fetterman at 4, Mark Cuban at 4, J.B. Pritzker at 5, Wes Moore at 5, Andy Bashir at 6. And by the way, guys,
AOC's on there. Wow.
Yeah, they have her at 6%. If they were to run, I'm telling you, a lot of these candidates would get destroyed by JD Vance. Like Pete Buttigieg, I'm sorry, he's not winning an election against JD. But look, again, it's just the truth. The gay thing would be a huge problem for Pete. It would just be a problem. Like, people just wouldn't like that.
What do you
I'm
think of
sorry.
Shapiro's chances? Because of course Shapiro in the game probably takes Pennsylvania out of the equation for the Republicans.
I honestly don't know, but if I had to say it, if they didn't make him VP now when it was clearly the better option, either two things. Either A, he didn't want the job, or two, they didn't want him because he's Jewish and it was going to backstab the base. And I'm in a mindset right now of they haven't learned anything, because clearly they haven't. All of the media, they haven't learned nothing. All of these Democrats, they haven't learned a single thing from what happened almost 2 weeks ago. And so if they were to nominate somebody, I would actually say that somebody like Gavin could realistically be the candidate. I really do think. And in their head, they would be like, oh, he's like the Trump of the Democrats, and like, oh, he's charismatic and this and that. But Gavin, here's the thing. I actually think black turnout would be abysmal in 28 if Gavin's the Democrat. I think it would be horrible. I think black turnout, depending on the race and like the approval of the Trump administration, could go all the way down to like possibly even like 9%. It could be catastrophic.
From what I know, anecdotally, a lot of just general liberal Americans don't like Gavin Newsom too much because they see him as kind of a sleazy guy.
He has an approval rating in California in the 40s. No, it's just not happening. It's like, sadly for them, he's actually the plurality favorite to win the nomination right now. And you can tell he has the aspiration to do it, because the entire cycle he remains super loyal to Biden, and he's going to use that to his advantage in the primary, which is going to really help him, because he was one of the only Democrats that was loyal to Biden. And even like when they swapped out Kamala Harris, they were not having it. Like, he was really not having it. So it's going to be to his benefit that he did that in the long run. He's a smart guy, but he's not likable. To a certain demographic, yes, but to like non-college whites, to like Hispanic voters and black voters, people are not going to like him. Hispanic voters would prefer JD way more than somebody like a Gavin. And so I really do honestly think that it's going to end up being a huge problem for the Democrats if they nominate a Gavin. And I think JD would honestly be the best standard bearer for the Republicans, because he kind of has that Trump momentum and appeal, but at the same time, he does actually kind of have this little, like, he's more composed and he's more articulate.
Now, insofar as Josh Shapiro, his whole thing is that he turned down being Kamala Harris's VP. You can argue for whatever reason. I mean, the obvious thing, aside from him not really believing in her, he's only recently been governor of PA. So he probably didn't want to step away from that immediately after getting that position, especially if Kamala's win, his mind is like, I don't think she's going to win. I don't think it's a guarantee. He could be biding his time until 2028, when will have more of a reputation in Pennsylvania, and he could use that to hold on to Pennsylvania come that election. And again, it's still early. Like, we're just, like you said, basically 2 weeks out from the election. After the election, I should say. Shapiro could probably overtake Gavin Newsom. Who he picks as his VP would be interesting. I'd wonder who. I could maybe see a Shapiro and AOC ticket where he has her.
I was actually just thinking that.
Her as VP to appeal to the progressives, and he himself, he's what I call he's a bluebird Democrat. He's mostly blue, but he has a red belly. Like, he knows how to appeal to the Republicans just enough to not alienate them.
Yeah, I think that would actually be a better ticket for them. Now, Josh Shapiro does have a lot of skeletons in his closet, more than most politicians do. He's got a thing in Pennsylvania where he basically ransacked a very famous Amish farmer's home.
I heard about that.
And
Yeah.
so that could be a really big problem for him with rural voters, and JD Vance could really yield that
The
very
Amish
well.
turn out again for the Republicans in the next election. That's going to be
Yep,
interesting.
I actually think that that would really hurt Shapiro in Pennsylvania, and not even just there, like in Appalachia, that would be a huge problem. There's also a story where supposedly this lady committed the act of self deletion and was found with 20 stab wounds somehow, and the governor and the state labeled it as a self deletion, and so that's another problem for him too. There's a lot of things with him that, yes, optically he's a really good candidate, but in the back there's a lot of problems. So the Democrats have to pick, because honestly, the Democrat voters don't pick their candidate. The party forces the candidate down their throats. They did this in 2016, they did this in 2020, they definitely did it in 2024. Now they didn't even hide it. They literally shoved it down their throat, quite literally. They just stole the nomination from Bernie twice.
Assuming the Trump administration is successful with a lot of its tariff policy and is able to reindustrialize a lot of this region, I could see Illinois probably being the most competitive it's ever been in this matchup. And then looking at New England, I see Vermont still holding strong, Massachusetts still holding strong for the Democrats. New York's probably also going to come closer than it's ever been. People forget that New York is also a little bit of a Rust Belt state. You have the Great Lake up there as well. Well, you have two Great Lakes, actually. You have Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. All along that coast, they're deindustrialized. If Trump brings back the industry to that area, I think you'll see New York become even more competitive than it was before.
Yeah.
New Jersey as well, I see as being more competitive. So the only safe states for Gavin: Hawaii, West Coast, Vermont, Massachusetts.
I think that Washington is probably gone, and I think Oregon the same. I think those would be plus 15 wins for Gavin. I think he'd do just fine there. However, I think that California is going to be possibly even lower than the Kamala victory, because he's not popular there. Keep in mind right now, according to Alice Intel, who was like basically the most accurate pollster in 2024, their poll has Harris at Gavin at like a 27% national approval rating. So he's like a lower than Hillary Clinton. Now, again, a lot of that's because a lot of people don't know him, but that's like historically bad. And it's not even that his positive is low and there's a lot of don't knows. His like unfavorable is like in the mid 40s. So there's already a lot of people that don't like him. It's not like he's at 20 something approved and like 26% disapprove. No, it's like he already has a large plurality of people who don't like him, and he's got a very small approval rating. So that's the really big problem for him too.
I think the Hispanic population factors into this as well. California's Hispanic population is only going to grow, and I can see Trump or JD courting them more successfully as the years go on. That's already sort of started. It's hard to say 100% how that'll end up.
Right.
But if Trump is successful in courting that demographic even more, then I'd say you could see California become more competitive. That's a good point.
Right. And like, for example, like I think probably JD does run it up in like Utah, Montana. Like Gavin would just not appeal to this area at all. Like it just wouldn't be right. New Mexico, I thought it was going to be more competitive this time. It wasn't. I think that JD would improve with Hispanics, but I think Gavin would do better with those white liberals in Albuquerque. So it just kind of is going to keep moving left again, unfortunately.
My position was actually that New Mexico would be a tilt red, because that Hispanic population is going to be rising. You're going to be watering down the influence of the white elite in that state. And I brought up, that's like the main demographic that backs Gavin Newsom. Like, if you look at the broad spectrum of who's in the Democratic Party, unless his VP is somebody that can really reach across the aisle, his support base is extremely, extremely narrow. I don't see there being too much support for him nationwide and in New Mexico specifically.
Right. Oh, we see here, I think Texas and Florida would be safe. Like those would be completely plus 15, Gavin would do horrible in Texas. He'd do super bad. I think Florida, the same thing. I think he loses Texas by like 17, and Florida's like a 19, 20 point DeSantis type margin for Vance. Like Vance, I don't think would do well at all in Florida, or Vance would just do very well in Florida. Okay, what's going on? We have some impersonators in the chat. Let's get rid of them. Okay, so I think those would be plus 15. I think Vance would possibly even win Miami-Dade by like plus 15 points. Like the state would be ruby, ruby, ruby red. Same thing with Texas. However, I do think with Iowa and Ohio, they're still going to be likely states, because my analysis on that is I do think college whites are going to move a little bit more to the left. I think that is going to happen. I think college educated voters in 28 will continue to move left, and Ohio and Iowa have a lot of them. So they'd be close to 15. I think Ohio would be like 13, 14. Iowa is like a similar margin to what it was this year.
You know what's going to be a fascinating factor that plays into that? Trump's idea of having a free online university for all Americans. So I wonder how
Yes,
that's going to
that's gonna
influence
be huge.
the college educated vote.
That's going to be huge too. We'll see how that happens, because they're going to get like a bachelor's equivalent. That when you finish that school, you get like a bachelor's degree equivalent. So when they vote, they're actually considered college educated vote. They're considered a college educated voting block. So that actually could be an X factor in that. Alaska, I think it's going to move left because Trump only won it by 14. And I expect the state, and I think Trump's been one of the last Republicans who could really hold a good influence on there. So I actually think Vance is only going to win it by like 8. I don't think that it would be one of the more lackluster performances. I think that Alaska is something that Republicans, it's not like, oh my God, like it's going to like flip in 28. But I think that somebody like a Nikki Haley could have actually had a really hard time in Alaska. Funny enough, I think that probably would have been true. I don't think
Alaska turning blue is going to signal the end of the American empire. That's when it all ends.
So I think that more than likely, because here's the thing. Yeah, the problem with like, and then New York and Illinois, like given everything right now, and let's say everything in the Trump administration goes through. Let's say that everything goes through, right? Like all of his policies get implemented. A lot of them are nationally popular. That could put Illinois and New York into the lean column, especially with a Gabbard on the ticket as well. I think that could potentially happen, and they could be more competitive, but we'd kind of have to wait and see. I think that Delaware would be in the likely column, still Rhode Island. I think Connecticut is the one that could actually narrow up quite significantly.
Really?
Virginia, I still think it's going to move left. I think that those Nova areas, that's where all the government, there's a lot of government workers there. And I think they're going to disapprove of Trump even more than now. Especially
I'm curious, why Connecticut? What's going on there?
Well, Connecticut, the raw margin difference in the state of Connecticut was a 14-point win, but it's roughly about a 130,000 vote win, give or take 150. So maybe it's not lean, but it definitely could be in that like likely-ish column. Like maybe it is in the likely column. Like that could be the case. I think that Minnesota, here's the thing about Gavin. I think Gavin would be extraordinarily weak in the Rust Belt, but I think he'd hold up a little bit better in the Sun Belt, but that's not saying much. Now, Maine at large, I think that's gone for Republicans. I don't think they're going to win it. Maybe it goes under 5. Like, it's possible, but like, I also think New Hampshire, I think, is gone too. I think that's going to become one of the more likely Democrat states, even compared to New York. Now, New York's margin's a little bit debatable. Maybe it's not under 5. Maybe it could be something like that. Like it's slightly debatable, maybe like 4 to 7, but that's something that I could see happening as well. Now, Minnesota, I actually think that state's moving. It only swung like 1.5 points in the major city areas to Trump. And so if Trump is doing, or if JD's doing worse with college educated voters, I think that Minnesota, I think is just gone. I think it's going to be like 6 or 7 for Gavin. It'll be similar to the 2020 performance. And that kind of leaves you with Nebraska second, New Jersey. Now, Nebraska second, I think that it'll probably be a similar margin to 2024. And that leaves us with these. Now, North Carolina, I don't think Gavin would do well here. He'd probably lose it by like 4 to 5, maybe. I think that Vance would actually do better there. But I think Georgia is the one that would be a problem for Vance, because Vance, in a place like Georgia, you have those Atlanta suburbs, which really moved to the left. And that's a lot of the college educated vote. And so I don't know if Vance exactly would be able to even improve even more on Trump's rural margins. So Georgia, I'm looking really, really iffy. But if I had to pick somebody, I would say Vance, but it's very close. I would say it's very close. I think Arizona and Nevada, those would actually, I have a hot take. I think Arizona would be closer than 2024, but I think Nevada would be more Republican by then, because with Nevada, you have a lot of Hispanics there, but you also have a lot of non-college whites there. Like, it's actually one of the swing states with the most non-college whites, about like 70% of the electorate, way more than any of the other swing states. And so if Vance is improving with that group, it's going to show more in Nevada than it would in Arizona. And there's a lot more college educated in Arizona than there is in Nevada. Now, I think that Vance would improve with Hispanics, so that's why you would have a 3 to 4 point win for Arizona for JD. So that puts him at 268 electoral votes. It's about there. And then at that point, he would just need Pennsylvania, where I actually think he'd do fairly well. I actually think he'd win against Gavin. I think he'd win Pennsylvania by like 3 or 4.
We didn't even color in New Jersey yet.
Nope. And I think Pennsylvania would be 3 to 4. I don't even think it would be close at all, actually. I think that Vance would actually kill him in Pennsylvania.
I can't see Gavin performing well in the suburbs. Yeah, that's a big issue.
No, I don't think, I definitely don't think he'd do well there at all. Michigan, especially if Trump brings back that auto industry, I think it would be very bad too. I think it would be very bad. Now, with Wisconsin, those Milwaukee suburbs are moving again. They're still moving left. But somebody like Vance, I think, actually would probably be able to perform better than Trump in Wisconsin. And then you have New Jersey. That's the last one. And I think with somebody like Gavin, somebody like JD and Tulsi, like, it's basically an effective toss-up. He would have 326 if he were won New Jersey. If Gavin were to win New Jersey, that becomes 312. If you enjoyed this clip from the podcast, hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this.